Hello, this is Jennifer Hooper, life coach, and I am doing my sixth interview now with women who have achieved hard things, who have had some obstacles in their path and worked their way through them. And today I am speaking with Maggie McReynolds, who lives in Colorado. How are you, Maggie?
I am good. Thanks for asking.
Maggie and I met a number of years ago in Denver, attending a workshop with another coach on manifesting $10,000. And you've done it twice now, at least, maybe more.
I have kept a running tab, and since starting that work, I have manifested over $171,000.
Are you kidding me?
I am not kidding.
Holy, that is amazing. Oh
that
my
would
gosh,
be from
I love it.
zero.
From zero. Oh my gosh. Well, that's an interview for another day.
Indeed.
For sure. So today we're going to talk about a challenging time in your life. And maybe we could just start, if you could give us an overview of your experience and what was going on.
Yeah. When I was 29 years old, I had a weird constellation of symptoms that were a curious combination of, I feel like I have the flu and I feel horribly hungover and like I've been poisoned.
Fun.
And I kept telling doctors that I feel like I've been poisoned. But this was 1989, and yes, I'm dating myself. And doctors really didn't know what to do with it. I got passed from doctor to doctor for a few months and was relatively lucky to be diagnosed with what they were then calling post-viral fatigue syndrome, which later became termed chronic fatigue syndrome. Again, 29 years old. I'd gotten married a year and a half previously. I had started my ad agency. I bought a house. My whole life is supposedly before me, and I really can't get up off the couch. And what the doctors told me.
So you can't really go to work or really
I
function at a
did
very
go to,
high
I was
level.
lucky to be self-employed. I did go to work, but honestly, what I was doing was like lying on the leather couch in my office and trying to work from flat.
Oh man. And
it really was having like a relentless, horrible hangover flu all the time.
I remember I had a bout with mono, even as an adult, I think not that long ago, within the last year, and chronic adrenal fatigue and just not being able to function. And I was able to get help pretty quickly, but I can't imagine a lifetime or just.
Yeah, this was fairly new as a diagnosis, or at least recognized as a diagnosis. And it wasn't well supported, including by the Centers for Disease Control, who kind of are bullshitty about it all these years later. So I was told, we don't know why you have this, and we don't know how to fix it. So go home and get a lot of rest. At 29.
Wow.
I went home and cried a lot. Yeah. Mostly on the floor because I couldn't get up off the floor. And I had to do things like rest on every landing of my staircase in order to make it up. I had a 3-story house at the time.
Oh my gosh.
I was insisting on trying to live a normal life. So I would get up and I would shower, but then I would have to stagger out, sopping wet, and lie on the bed for a while until I had enough strength to get dressed. So my whole life was like that. I did get somewhat better, but I was still very limited. I could walk maybe a block. I could stand for maybe 2 or 3 minutes at a time before I'd have to sit. If you weren't paying super close attention, I looked kind of sort of normal. And I certainly had people, charge up to me with my handicap parking sticker and confront me and be angry. I looked fine.
Yeah.
And I usually said something like, if you would like this placard in this space, I would be happy to trade you life circumstances.
Ooh, what a good response. I love that.
I would love to be just walking all the blocks from my parking space. Truly.
Yeah. How
so
long did this last?
That lasted until, so the years go by. I cobbled together a living. I ran my ad agency. I became a restaurant critic. I became an editor. I became the columnist. I became a managing editor, a voiceover talent. And all this time, I am this limited.
Wow.
And
So we're talking years.
We're talking decades.
Decades. Oh my God.
So by the time I was 37, I got pregnant by accident. as much as one can at 37.
Like,
And
do we not know how that happened?
It really brought home to me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 37 years old, and if having a child is something that's important to me, I kind of got to get on it now or let it go.
Yeah.
And I had kept waiting to recover. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm ever going to. So I just have to go on with my life as is and accept my limitations. So I did have a son at 40. I celebrated my 40th birthday by finding out I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And I just want to say that because I turn 60 tomorrow, I'm a little scared. Pretty sure I'm not going to wake up pregnant. But, you know.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is that, we moved from house to house to house. Unbeknownst to me, there was an environmental problem in every house we lived in.
Okay.
And I just didn't know the repercussions.
What kind of environmental problem?
Well, it turned out that at least in the final house where I went bedridden again after 20 years, I mean, severely bedridden, like sitting on the floor of the shower because I couldn't stand, crawling to the bathroom, unable to drive the 1 mile drive to my doctor's office by myself, bedridden. Such severe tachycardia that if I even sat up in bed, my heart rate would go up to like 150 beats a minute. It was crazy.
Wow.
And it went on for almost a year and a half. What happened is that I saw a chronic fatigue syndrome expert in Asheville, and he wasn't a lot of help, except that he ran a battery of blood work. And the only abnormality was an inflammatory marker that was like crazy off the charts, crazy off the charts. And although there's no way to know what the inflammation specifically was from, he just made a passing comment to me that changed my life. And what he said was, it's interesting. The only time I see these crazy levels with people is when there's mold in their houses.
Whoa.
And I knew my house smelled musty. I knew my house smelled damp. It was a 50s bi-level built into the side of a hill in the woods. I just didn't know it was that big a health hazard.
Right. No kidding.
I mean, now I think that's more on people's radar screens, but this was 10, 12 years ago and it wasn't.
Right.
And so I started pursuing that hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's the mold? And I started taking action based on what if it's the mold. And I tried getting out to a hotel and then moving from a hotel to a friend's house in Kansas and then moving from that friend's house in Kansas to a sublet in Colorado. I kept trying to move increasingly into drier.
I'm smiling because I'm getting like all this confirmation in my body. Like, this is what she needed to do. And she did the right thing. Yeah.
Within the first
like little
day of getting to Colorado, I could drive my car.
You're kidding.
I had not been
that fast.
I couldn't drive it far and I felt like crap, but I could do it. And that was new and it definitely got my attention. So I never actually did mold testing. I never actually pursued a huge diagnosis with me. I would go on to have my son genetically tested.
Okay.
I just decided this is what feels true to me in my body. And this is how I'm observing my body react when I behave as if this is true, that this is a threat to me.
So powerful.
As a result of this pursuit, and on the advice of many mold experts, I said goodbye to my house and everything in it. So all of it would have been cross-contaminated with mold.
Oh, no way. All your stuff too.
All my stuff.
I didn't think of that.
All of my son was 9 at the time. He had toys. He had favorite stuffed animals.
Yeah.
We had a dog that we chose to give up. And not because he was moldy so much as because he was a giant Newfoundland. My marriage was falling apart under the stress of this. And I did not see how I was going to be a single disabled mom halfway across the country in Colorado with a 130-pound dog.
Right.
And the landlords are going to love me. So
sometimes we have to make tough choices for ourselves.
My whole family made a tremendous sacrifice, including the man who would become my ex-husband, with whom I'm still very close. And we have a very good friendship.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
But we all gave up everything.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want people to know is that in giving up what I perceived as everything, my job at the time as the managing editor of a city magazine, my marriage, my bank account for really sure, every article of anything I ever owned, all my son's stuff, every friend I had, living in the same town with my mother, living 30 minutes away from my son's aunts and uncles and cousins. We gave all of that up. But in doing so, I found health and myself. And
Talk more about finding yourself in this.
Well,
what do you mean by that?
Unsurprisingly, after 20, 25 years of being identified as seriously and chronically ill, that had become a huge part of who I identified as.
Mm-hmm.
And also, and I wouldn't know this till years later, mold has a huge cognitive effect on people who are affected, and toxic mold will have a cognitive effect on anybody. So the three of us in our last house were all very ragey and impatient and teary. Even my son and my ex were not as strongly physically affected as I would, but we all kept suffering with bouts of pneumonia and respiratory infections. Wow. My son had this adorable, croaky, husky voice from the moment he learned to talk. And I thought it was so cute. And that's just his voice. When we got up to Colorado, it cleared for the first time in his life.
Wow.
So,
oh my gosh.
Being so sick meant that I was forced to define myself in part by my limitations.
Got it.
I had trained to be a life coach, but I was literally, Zoom wasn't a thing yet. We had Skype and it was wonky.
Yeah.
You tried to talk to more than two people on Skype, it would bump somebody out of the room.
Right. Yeah.
It was hard. So mostly I talked to people on the phone, and I would say that most of my clients had no idea that I was flat on my back in bed.
Right. Okay.
I didn't withhold it.
Yep.
If it felt relevant to our work together or like a good teaching example or a teachable moment, I would definitely talk about it.
Yeah.
But there were plenty of people for whom it just would have been weird and in the way for me to bring this up. Hey, did you know I'm in my PJs?
Right.
I can barely sit up, So
yeah.
What I didn't yet know about myself, because I got sick so young, was who can I be if I do not have these physical limitations?
Right. Oh,
During all those years, I couldn't travel. I couldn't, to some extent, my growth as a human was a little inhibited.
Yeah.
Because my day was really wrapped up in just surviving it.
Right.
Right. In survival mode, as anybody who's had either a chronic or a short-term illness knows, there's not much energy for anything except, okay, cool, I didn't die today.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It sort of reminds me of, the fact that you were discovering yourself of, when you're transitioning from a teenager living under your parents' roof and their rules, and then you go out and then there's this whole new world out there that you start exploring and tasting and experiencing and traveling, and you did that later in life. Maybe it was round two. Maybe you did it as a teenager too, before you got sick. But I am just envisioning that is like a whole new world became available.
Oh my, yes.
All of a sudden.
So on my 50th birthday, so practically 10 years ago tomorrow, I had such terrible vertigo that I couldn't get out of bed without falling down.
Wow.
And my partner, who had driven from another state, we lived in different states at the time, how we celebrated my 50th birthday by taking me to a chiropractor for an adjustment, hoping it would help. And I didn't know then that vertigo is a huge symptom of mold toxicity.
Oh, I didn't know that
so
either.
Interestingly, so here's another good takeaway. At the beginning, I told you that I kept telling doctors I feel like I've been poisoned.
Yeah.
I had been.
Really?
Nobody knew to look for it.
Do you think it's more, there's more awareness now? Or do you think it's still quite as...
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I do know that I experience personally that when I tell people my story now, nobody reacts like, well, you're crazy.
And people used to.
10 years ago,
my
family wanted to have me committed.
Whoa. Okay.
Because they heard me saying things like, something in my house is trying to kill me. And they were like, okay, Maggie's gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
They weren't being mean. They were terrified. But they assumed it was a mental illness.
Got it.
And that I had become fixated on this strange thing. So just in
Wow.
10 years, things have come a long way, and there's much more awareness. What there is not yet in place, and this is a whole different interview, so I won't go into it, but what there isn't yet in place is, what do we do about this?
Yeah.
There's
Right.
still far too many mold mitigators and people out there
Mm-hmm.
who are doing it incorrectly in ways that won't save the structures and won't help people recover their health. And
Oh,
that's still in its infancy, what to do with
got
that.
it.
And I do believe global climate change, it's just going to be a bigger and bigger problem as more and more places flood.
Do you know any statistics or have any information about how many people are affected by mold?
I don't, but I can tell you a horrifying statistic, and the belief is that as much as 75% of our public school buildings are compromised by mold.
Oh, no way. Wow.
Schools are especially vulnerable because they tend to have flat roofs that collect water. They tend to
Mm-hmm.
be indifferently maintained,
Mm-hmm.
and they tend to date from an era when construction, starting in about the 70s, 80s, 90s,
Mm-hmm.
we started to do kind of paper-like construction. We started putting
Yeah.
Chinese cellulose, it's cellulose from China. It's essentially a paper product.
Yeah.
We started using that as insulation. It's cheap, it's effective,
Mm-hmm.
but mold spores love it.
Love it.
It's just mold
Oh,
food.
man.
And
Yeah.
so all you need is to have a house that was framed in while it rained and the wood was still damp, or a
No kidding.
pinpoint plumbing leak in the wall, the size of a pin that's just slowly dripping, and you have the perfect recipe to grow black mold.
Oh, no way.
It won't necessarily
Wow.
have to smell. It won't
Okay.
necessarily be visible within the interior
Mm-hmm.
walls of the home.
Okay.
So
Wow.
like
You just
I
have
said,
no
mold
idea.
mitigation and remediation is a whole other.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I realize you gave up everything and started this whole new life for yourself. Not everybody can do that, or maybe not everybody is willing to do that for whatever reason.
Mhm.
If someone's feeling the way you felt, do you have any words of wisdom or recommendation or advice?
The first most important thing is to identify if that's really the problem. Now, if they're in a position where I can't afford to mitigate this, mitigation is really expensive. It is multiple 5 figures in many cases. And if someone's not in a position to take that on financially,
Yep.
they really might have the heebie-jeebies around having mold testing done and then having to disclose on a real estate form that, yes, my house is toxic mold,
Yeah.
but I can't afford to fix it. So I think the most important thing is to temporarily, and I just mean even a few nights, get out of the house,
Mm-hmm.
see how you feel, if there's any difference when you're someplace else, especially someplace preferably that's a fairly new build
Mm-hmm.
and
That makes sense.
likely to be similarly compromised.
Okay.
If you understand that this is the problem that you're dealing with, there's only really 2 ways to deal with it. It's not a happy solution. One is you spend the money to have it professionally remediated.
Mm-hmm.
And you need people with hazmat suits and reverse pressure
Sounds like
machines.
asbestos removal. Same.
Yes,
idea.
it's very, very similar. You don't want the mold spores to go generally airborne within your home.
Makes sense.
So, and please, people, don't bleach mold. It does not kill the spores. It just dries them out like dandelion seed, and then they go everywhere.
Oh, get out. Okay.
Don't bleach mold.
Good
Don't bleach
advice.
mold.
Okay.
If you have to do something, hydrogen peroxide is a somewhat better choice.
Okay.
So you have it properly mitigated, or really you do need to move.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And now I'm specifically talking about a toxic mold situation.
Mm-hmm.
Not all mold is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Most mold is not toxic. The stuff you see growing in your grout in your bathroom is likely not toxic.
Okay. Got it.
It's mold, but it's,
Interesting.
don't eat it, don't lick it,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't snort it, but
All right. All of a sudden I'm thinking about the house that I live in that my kids grew up in, and every spring my daughter, we would just say it's her spring cough. Are there seasons for mold? Could that have, because we have kind of a musty basement, I'm not going to lie.
Yes. It also could easily have been seasonal allergies with whatever was pollinating, at the time. My son spends every June Even here in a house that I'm confident does not have mold in it, my son spends every June with his nose like completely blocked and sneezing and sneezing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Sneezing and sneezing.
Okay.
And it's almost like June 1st to June 30th. Like it's just
Just
it is whatever is pollinating at that time.
yeah.
God hates it.
I guess the reason I thought for her, maybe it was mold because it doesn't happen to her anymore. She doesn't live here.
Does she live in a different part of the world?
No, she's still in Maine.
Okay, well, maybe.
Who knows? I don't know.
I mean, to me, I would pay more attention to things like chronic sore throats, ear infections.
Got it.
Moodiness,
Oh.
brain fog.
Okay.
Like I said, I didn't really realize until we were all out of the house how strongly cognitively we were all affected.
Right. No kidding.
My marriage might have survived had we not been living.
Wow. And isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I was certainly half crazy, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think my son and my ex were, doing super well either. My son had a lot of rages and started hitting and biting other kids. And
wow.
It could have been just him, of course, but I really think it was magnified by the toxicity of our environment.
So tell us how life is for you now.
Life is really good for me now. I own my own business. I guess I really always have, but I'm able to take it to a much broader and bigger level than I could when I was bedridden. So I'm able to, travel around the country, travel around the world, lead retreats for my book clients.
Oh, that's awesome. And obviously you sit in chairs now instead of always having to lie down.
To lie down, yes. I'm sitting in a chair just like a real person. And I still do sometimes find when I'm walking the dog or something, I'll still be like, get me, I'm walking the dog,
That's awesome. Yeah.
I can't take it for granted anymore. And I think that the biggest takeaway is, so life is very good and very full. I am active. I may be turning 60 tomorrow, but I am a million times stronger, healthier, more vibrant than I was at 50, or probably even at 40. Maybe even at 30, because I was already sick at 30.
Right.
So weirdly, some people say things like, oh, you're getting older and aches and pains and you're kind of slower. And I'm like,
you're like, no.
I'm like, well, yes. I mean, like my knees are not what they were when I was younger. But at the same time, I'm like, it's all so much better. I mean, I felt so bad when I was younger that this is actually an improvement.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would notice related changes. But the biggest takeaway, I think, honestly, Jennifer, is if you think back to it, I was telling doctors 30 years ago that I felt like I'd been poisoned.
Right.
I knew.
Right.
I knew.
Right.
I knew. My body knew. I knew. But what I didn't know was to honor that. I didn't know. I didn't know to go, no. Something is poisoning me. Let's figure out what it is.
Yeah. So now how are you about honoring yourself and what you need?
I really pay attention to my felt sense of things. And sometimes that is a physical awareness in my body. Sometimes it's an instinct, gut feeling, that's more of a thought. Sometimes it's, I still can't really be around mold well. That part of my immune system is a little broken and may always be. So there are buildings, dwellings that I won't go into now. If I do go in, I'm walking right back out. It's super important in my survival.
Yes.
And keep in mind, it does not always smell like mold. So it's really important in my survival that I stay really aware of my instincts.
I love it.
And if I'm standing outside a building and I've got a hell no response, I need to believe it. And I think that is informed, my whole life isn't about mold, thank God.
Yeah.
I think that has informed the non-mold areas.
Yes, I would imagine.
That hell no and that hell yes, I pay attention because I'm aware that I have levels of knowingness that exist outside of my conscious thoughts.
And we all do. And so I'm so glad you said that because speaking for myself, I often in my earlier years would discount that knowing, that intuition, no, this isn't right. And I would do it anyway. And it never works out well, ever.
Right. Right. And
no matter what it is.
I think it's challenging to separate that from fear, from like nameless, spaceless fear.
Right.
But I do think that culturally, especially in the West, we have a lot of shamey terms for stuff like that. Yep. Oh, you're being superstitious.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're second guessing yourself. Right. You're, you know, it's I think that those are valid questions.
You're being crazy. Just
you're being crazy.
It.
You know, yeah. I told you earlier that at one time my family wanted to have me committed.
Yes. Right.
Not because they didn't love me, or not because because it sounded crazy.
Right.
Hey, my house might be trying to kill me.
Right.
And you know, that wasn't in the news or in the media at the time with mold, and they were sort of like, okay, Maggie turned 50 and then she lost her mind. You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right.
In truth, I'd kind of found something for the first time. But my point is, there will always be plenty of people to try to talk us out of what we know to be true in our hearts.
Yes. Oh, so true.
And they may be, and they're likely to be, the people who are the closest to us, the most loving, the people that we think should be, and maybe sometimes are, our biggest supporters. But when they act from fear, they will question everything. And if we're proposing something that sounds like a change, humans are not fond of change, right? In our ancestral past, change did not mean yay usually.
Right. Right.
Oh, it's an ice age. Or,
right.
Change is not good. You know, there's no
We're
caveman.
Still wired that way.
There's no caveman who goes, you know, this has been a good hunting ground this way, but I'm just going to randomly go the other way and see what happens. Because that way might lie the saber-toothed tigers. You just don't know.
Yeah.
So everyone around us will resist our changing.
So true.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Unless they've been on their own transformational journey.
And we have to really dig deep and stand up for ourselves.
Yeah.
Even with the fear that you mentioned.
Even with people saying that sounds whack.
Right.
That sounds really weird. You're really strange.
Oh, well, Maggie, I love your story. I love your advice. I love your wisdom and what you have extracted from this experience. Quite a journey you have been on.
Thanks for giving me a little bit of a pulpit.
Yeah,
I can talk about this for a while.
Tell everybody what you do and how people can reach you if they want to work with you.
Sure, thank you. I am a book coach and editor, and through my company, Unsettling Books, I help entrepreneurs get their messages out into the world in the form of a book in a way that takes themselves and their business to the next level, and dare I say, changes the world a little bit. And those who might be interested in finding out more about what that looks like, or who just want to talk mold or anything else, can find me on Facebook at, I think the handle is facebook.com/the Maggie McReynolds. I'm also at facebook.com Maggie McReynolds Unsettling Books, and you can find my website at iamunsettling.com.
Perfect. When you reminded me that you are the author of Unsettling, I remembered that there's an excerpt from me in your book.
There is. Yes, that is part of our story together too.
Yes, that's right.
You were kind enough to let me interview you.
Yeah. Well, I guess we've come full circle.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let me find the right button to get ready to stop this recording. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You are welcome. And if you need me to record something pithier, because that was, long.
It's all good. We're going to roll with it. Cool. All right. Thanks.
It's really good to talk to you, Jennifer.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.